Mr. President, reserving the right to object, I want to say a few words about the Biden administration's policies on the very subject to which Dr. Laura Taylor Calais is going to be in charge. Now, I have been working with this administration, probably more than most Republican senators, particularly on Department of Defense issues, on Department of Defense personnel, on helping them actually get confirmed. So I don't come down here and do this lightly. Heck, I introduced the Secretary of Defense, Secretary Austin, at his confirmation hearing and then whipped votes to make sure he got confirmed. So this is not my regular course of business, even as it relates to the Biden administration, but particularly as it relates to the Department of Defense. I've been someone who's been trying to help. But I am objecting because the Biden administration's policies are completely at odds with the president's public statements and my friend from Wisconsin's statements about the need for an industrial policy and critical minerals that will help our military and help our economy. Dr. Taylor Calais will be in charge of this at the Pentagon. Industrial policy, critical minerals, rare earths. And what we're seeing, Mr. President, is they talk about this, but then they take actions against these very policies that hurt us. And the number one area where they take actions, Mr. President, is my state, the great state of Alaska, that has more energy for America, more critical resources, more critical minerals, more rare earths for our nation. For our nation. My state has had 40 executive orders or executive actions in 2 years from this administration issued singularly and solely against Alaska. Of course, that's crushing the economy of my state, workers in my state, but here's the broader point for this topic today. It is really undermining America's national security, critical minerals, natural resources. We all know we need them, and yet one big part of America is the target of this administration to shut it down. And it's ridiculous, Mr. President. As I said to my colleague, if a Republican administration went to Wisconsin or issued 40 executive orders and executive actions solely against Wisconsin or Maine, and you guys came to me and said, hey, Dan, help us. Geez, Louise, the war on Alaska, help. I would help. My state's getting crushed. Here's the specific issue that relates to this nominee. The president held a summit on critical minerals, a good example of what we need to do. On February 22nd, 2022, and he said, we need these critical minerals. The demand for them is going to increase 400 to 600% over the next several decades. Quote, we can't build a future that's made in America if we are ourselves dependent on China for the materials that power the products of today and tomorrow and our national security. That's the President of the United States on his big critical minerals summit, hosted at the White House to talk about supply chains and industrial capacity and military issues. Mr. President, the same day the President of the United States held that critical minerals summit, the Department of Interior said that they were going to reverse a 7-year EIS record of decision, $10 million by professional staff in the federal government on what's called the Ambler Mining District in Alaska, one of the biggest, most extensive sources of critical minerals in the country, maybe even in the world. And that same day, a project, by the way, has been in permitting since the Obama administration. That same day, they reversed it and said, Alaska, start over. Nuts. Crazy. So what I've done is I've put a hold on a couple Department of Defense nominees who are in charge of this area. And Dr. Taylor Kalau is one. But I've been reasonable, Mr. President. I went to the Secretary, or the Deputy Secretary of Interior, the Deputy Secretary of Defense. We held a conference with White House officials, and I simply said, I'm not asking to reverse your crazy decision, which it was crazy. Hurts my state for sure, but hurts the national security of our country. I simply said, I want 3 simple asks. So I've been trying to work to get her nominee cleared. 3 simple asks from this administration. Identify a definitive workable schedule with a clear, legitimate timeline for completing the review of this project that's already been in almost 10 years of permitting. To do it in a timely manner, that was number 1. Clearly state the federal government's administration to allow the Alaska entities that are trying to move this forward to continue to complete baseline scientific data gathering and design work, such as wetland delineations, engineering reconnaissance for this road, that was number 2, and allow these Alaska entities that are moving this road and project forward to complete its planned geological drilling and core sampling program, which is critical to advancing the project and engineering design, as this case is now being remanded. That was it. That was it. 3 simple requests. None of these are hard. None of them are hard. I've raised this with the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, of course, Interior, and they keep telling me no. This is easy. If the Department of Defense, or I'm sorry, if the Secretary of Interior came and said, Senator Sullivan, I saw your remarks on the floor. I agree with all 3 of those things. You're right, they're simple. I would lift my hold today. So the ball's in the administration's court. They really want Dr. Taylor Calais to be confirmed. They could do it tonight. Meet my requests, which are quite reasonable. I did not ask them to review or reverse the crazy decision that they made in February of 2022. These are very simple requests. I've been very reasonable on this. No one on their side is being reasonable, so I will continue to hold her and some of the other DoD nominees who are in charge of critical minerals and industrial capacity in the Department of Defense until the simple demands that I'm asking for that not only will help my state, but will help the national security of America. And they won't do it, so I object.